Well, as we look toward Resurrection Sunday, we want to consider each day of the week that Jesus lived before he ended up going to the cross. On Monday, he goes into the temple, and something very extraordinary happens there. You see, people, when they came back for the Passover, and that's what time of the year this was, some 2,000 years ago, they were to bring a lamb, a male lamb without blemish, and offer it as a sacrifice to atone, to appease God, to make things right between them and God. There had to be the shedding of blood. That had been the tradition, that had been the command from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And so when the people came, there was a system set up within the temple courts to where there would be an inspection of the lamb or the animal that they brought to sacrifice. Many of them were rejected. But it just so happened that the religious authorities over in the court of Gentiles would have had pre-approved sacrificial animals. And the problem for the people is that they sold them at exorbitant prices, extremely inflated prices, which hindered people from coming to God. And it made it more a place of merchandise and marketing than it was a place of worship and prayer. Jesus goes into the temple and he sees what's going on, and he begins to drive those money changers out of the temple. And he says in Matthew 21 and verse 12, "My house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." My friends, that's what Jesus did 2,000 years ago, and what he did then, he continues to do today. For you and I who are believers, the first thing that Jesus does when he comes into our heart is he examines what is there. And if there's anything there that is defiling the temple, let me remind you that our hearts are the temple of God now. 1 Corinthians 3 and verse 16, Paul says, "Don't you know that you are the temple of God and the Spirit of God resides within you?" When Jesus looks around, he sees things in our temple heart that are keeping us from him, and a place that's sanctified and pure and holy for him. He starts stirring the place like he did the temple 2,000 years ago. It can even, some of the things that we have in our heart can even seem to be noble or reasonable or even worthwhile being there. But when Jesus looks at them, he sees them as hindrances. Let me remind you that in the very beginning, when Eve was in the garden, she saw the fruit on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And she said it was pleasing to the eyes, it will look good for food, and it appeared to make one wise. See, she rationalized, she thought this would be good for me, even though God said, no, it won't be good for you. And when she partook of it, when Adam partook of it, it separated them from God. It hindered them in their fellowship. My friends, we can allow things in our heart to do the same thing. So this week, let God examine, let the Lord examine your heart to see if there's anything in there, any activity that you're engaged in or leading your family to be engaged in that might be defiling your temple, that might be hindering your relationship with Christ. Let him stir you. Let him cleanse you. And as you come to worship this coming Sunday, you'll be able to worship God and have a deeper appreciation for what Christ has and is doing for us even now.